Hi, everyone, and welcome to our pre-arrival webinar for the upcoming Teach in Vietnam program. So today I'm going to go through some things to continue to think about, including documents, visas, what to pack, etc. Lots of things to consider before coming over in a couple of weeks. So I'm going to run through all of that. Of course, this is being recorded, so I will send it to you in an email. And if you have any questions about anything mentioned in this webinar, please feel free to email me with your questions. So we are going to go through a couple of things today, including documents and what to continue to keep submitting if you haven't already submitted all of your documents, a reminder on legalization, and a reminder on local Vietnamese police check if you choose to do that option. We'll talk about visas, budgeting, and other housekeeping items, arrival in Ho Chi Minh City, and some information about teaching in Vietnam. So if you haven't already submitted all your documents, please make sure to continue to submit documents. I will be continuing to check in on any missing documents. So if you get an email from me saying submit any sort of missing document, please send it to me as soon as you can. So continue to submit documents, including but not limited to your photo, your resume and video for your teacher profile documents, your passport copy, insurance details. So everyone needs to be covered for insurance for at least your first 3 months in Vietnam from when you arrive. A police or background check from your home country, a bachelor or master's degree, whatever you have, whatever you'd like to get legalized, or whatever you'd like to use for the work permit, and your TESOL, TEFL, or CELTA certificate for those who have already completed a TEFL, TESOL, or CELTA. For those who are doing the in-class TESOL course with us coming up, you obviously haven't received that yet, so no need to submit that. Your legalization documents, so a police or background check if you are legalizing it in your home country, your legalization of your bachelor's or master's degree, and again, those who are who have already done a TEFL, TESOL, or CELTA certificate, a legalization copy of that document. COVID-19 vaccine records, if you have those, you can submit them. Not all schools require that anymore. It's pretty much fading out, but you can submit them if you have them. A name difference letter, if you need a name difference letter, if your name on a degree doesn't match name on a passport or your TESOL or police check, etc., for any of those 3 documents, we will advise you if you need a name difference letter in any capacity by reviewing your documents. This should have already been told to you, of course, but if you have questions about any of that, let me know. Visas, once you get your completed visa documents, please send me a copy. Those of you who are doing the TESOL course are going to come over on a tourist visa, so make sure that you've applied for your tourist visa if you've not already done so. We sent you an email last week, I believe, to apply for your tourist visa. Those of you who are doing our placement program have already interviewed, accepted positions. You are all just waiting for your visa paperwork to be issued to you from your school. So we're just kind of in a waiting mode there, but we'll go over that more in a moment. And of course, flight details into Vietnam. If you've not already purchased your flights, please do so immediately and send me a copy. We'll need a copy of your flight details to arrange your airport pickups in Vietnam. And then final reminder, pretty much all this sort of stuff, make sure you have copies of all of these things when you arrive in Vietnam. But very, very importantly, you need to remember to bring your original passport, number one. You won't be able to get onto your flight without your passport, so bring your passport, your original degree, your original TEFL, TESOL, CELTA certificate, if that applies to you, and your original police check and any original legalized documents that you've done up to this point, or are doing the legalization process in your home country, if that applies to you. Make sure you have all of that sort of stuff with you, and bring it with you to Vietnam. You may or may not end up needing these original documents for your work permit, for your visa extension process. More than likely you will, but sometimes schools can issue copies to immigration, but definitely bring the originals just in case. Legalization of documents. We have been pestering you guys about this for a very long time, so hopefully none of this is new information. But remember that to apply for a work permit in Vietnam, certain documents need to be legalized for that process. These documents include a bachelor's or a master's degree. If you have both, you don't need to legalize both, you just need to legalize one. A TESOL, TEFL, or CELTA certificate. Again, if you have multiple different certificates, you only need to do one. A police or background check from your home country, or alternatively, and we've put this in our documentation to you guys in the past, alternatively, you can get a local Vietnamese check done as well. But if you do a home police check and you get that legalized in your home country or either at an embassy in Vietnam after you arrive, if that applies to you, Americans, Canadians, etc., then you can use that police check for the work permit. Otherwise, if you get a home check and you don't want to legalize it for some reason, then you can get a local Vietnamese police check and use that for the work permit process. But do make sure that you understand the legalization process for these 3 documents. Whatever your case may be, again, some nationalities have to do the legalization process in their home countries for their documents. So that includes those from the UK and those from South Africa, versus some nationalities are able to do the affidavit process, legalization process in their home country before coming to Vietnam, or the affidavit process at their particular embassy after arriving in Vietnam. So make sure you understand what process you need to do. If you've already started the legalization process, make sure that you are completing that process in whatever country you're doing it in, your home country, and you know that it's completed after you send your documents to the Vietnamese embassy for their stamp. And a picture of the stamp from the embassy is here on the right-hand side. You want to see that stamp. If you send us a copy of a legalized document without that stamp, either I'll ask you to resend it if you have received it, or if you haven't received that stamp, your process is not done. So make sure that you are fully completing that legalization process. Do remember, of course, that you can bundle your documents together for this process. As long as it has the embassy stamp, then you're good to go. Now, for those who are wanting to do the local Vietnamese police check, so you've gotten a home background check done, but you don't want to legalize it at home because it costs a lot of money, fair enough, no problem. If you choose to, you can bring your home check to Vietnam, and you can then also apply for a local Vietnamese police check once you've arrived in Vietnam. Schools are happy to accept local ones just as much as they are happy to accept home background checks. Now, for us, for Explorasia, we need to see a copy of your home background check for our due diligence to keep on file, of course. But for the work permit process, you can either do the home police check if it's been legalized or received an affidavit, or use a local Vietnamese police check. Do note, however, though, to get a local Vietnamese police check done in Vietnam, you need to have rented a long-term accommodation, because your landlord will need to register you at local immigration and local police, and then at that point you can apply for the local police check. You can't do that without long-term accommodation in Vietnam. So do make sure you do that first before applying for your check. And then once you do apply, the process can generally take around 4 weeks to get back. So do plan that accordingly. If this is your plan to do a local Vietnamese police check after arriving in Vietnam, plan out, of course, how long it might take you when you plan on doing it, that sort of stuff. And again, as I've noted already, if you obtain a local Vietnamese police check, you still must provide Explorasia with a police check from your home country for our due diligence. Okay, one more document to talk about, the IELTS exam or similar English proficiency language exam. The IELTS exam stands for International English Language Testing System exam. This is just simply an English language proficiency exam that's used worldwide. It's very well known. This is often required for those who are considered non-native English speakers to be able to work abroad in different countries. Vietnam isn't the only country that requires this. Other countries do, like South Korea, Thailand, etc. The IELTS exam or similar English proficiency exam is required if you don't hold a passport from the United States, the United Kingdom, Ireland, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, or South Africa. And so if you hold a passport from anywhere outside of these countries, an IELTS exam done in your home country is required, and you need to also legalize that document in your home country to be able to be used then to apply for the work permit. And of course, the exam, the person must pass the exam with a C1 result or higher, and again, legalize that in their home country. Now, South Africans, those with South African passports, South Africans are considered non-native speakers in the north of Vietnam, and they are considered native speakers in the south of Vietnam. It's very confusing. Not sure why the government has decided that, but that's what it is. So anyone who holds a South African passport who wishes to work in the north of Vietnam will be required, no matter what, to obtain either an IELTS exam or similar exam, and reach the specific results, of course, and that will then be used for the work permit. It's a requirement if you want to work in the north and you hold a South African passport. Those who want to work in the south, only some schools for their work permit process require having an IELTS or similar exam from South African passport holders. So if you're a passport holder from South Africa and you don't want to take any exam at all, then we would focus on placing that teacher in the south of Vietnam, and only at particular schools, of course, that don't require a proficiency exam. So it kind of depends on where you want to be working, what the rules and regulations are in that particular area, etc. Let me know, or let any of the team, of course, know if you do have any questions about that. Now, of course, the IELTS exam is a bit expensive, and then you have to legalize it on top of that. Totally, it can be a lot of money. So an alternative is to take a V-STEP exam in Vietnam after you arrive. It costs only 1,800,000 Vietnamese dong, but the exam takes 2 days to complete, and is all proctored in Vietnamese because it's specifically made for Vietnamese citizens testing their English abilities. So it can be a little difficult to fully understand, that sort of thing. But we've had teachers do it in the past rather successfully. So if you would prefer to complete that exam rather than doing an IELTS exam, please let me know, let the team know, and we can talk about that further. Right, visas. So this section is specifically for those who are completing our placement program. So you guys have interviewed at schools, accepted schools, and now are waiting for visa paperwork. So this specifically applies to you, and I'll talk about the TESOL guys here in a minute. So those of you who are doing our placement program, you are going to be coming over on business visas sponsored by your school. This is essentially an employment visa, and it will last you for 3 months upon arrival in Vietnam. It can then be extended if needed and as needed. I believe everybody is receiving visa on arrival paperwork from their schools, which is great. So for all of you, we're all in the process of simply waiting for your school to issue the completed paperwork, which I know can be very frustrating and nerve-wracking. But schools do this all the time for their teachers, you know, who have been placed outside of Vietnam or who have accepted a job outside of Vietnam. So it should all be fine. I'm keeping a very close eye on schools and that sort of stuff, and we'll update you, either I or the school update you once the paperwork is done. But simply, we just have to wait for the school to issue the paperwork. Once the paperwork has been issued from your school, they will do so digitally via email, and all you need to do is print off the paperwork provided, as well as complete an application form, which I'll be sending to you guys if I've not already sent to you. You'll also need to obtain passport size photos of yourself to apply for the visa upon arrival at the Vietnam airport. You can do that in your home country by just visiting a photo shop and having a little visa photo printed off of yourself. And then also remember to bring $25 for the visa on arrival cost. So all that paperwork will be issued to you from your school as soon as the paperwork is done, which hopefully for you guys you'll receive your paperwork maybe in the next week or two. And then when you fly over to Vietnam, all you need to do is, you know, show that paperwork to your airline when you board, and then fly over to Vietnam. When you arrive at the airport in Vietnam, whatever airport you're arriving to, either Hanoi or Ho Chi Minh City, it's the same process. You go to the visa on arrival counter. They're very, very obvious. When you get there, you hand in your paperwork from the school, your passport, your fee, your photos, the application form, etc. And they process the visa for you right there and then at the counter. Generally takes 20 to 30 minutes or so, maybe a little longer, maybe a little shorter. Once done, they'll call your name and they'll have your passport sticker that looks like this in the top right-hand corner. They'll have that in your passport ready to go, and then you can go through immigration and then collect your bags from there. It's very, very easy to do. It's not a very difficult process at all. You just need to remember to print off that paperwork, but we'll remind you right before you're departing for Vietnam. Now, those of you who are doing the TESOL program, you obviously haven't interviewed yet for schools. You'll be doing that during your TESOL, so you're going to arrive on a tourist visa as normal. We have all asked you to apply for your tourist visas already, so if you've not already done so, please do so immediately. And when you receive the visa back, send me a copy of your visa paperwork for our files. But do apply as soon as you can. It should only take, a couple of business days for the visa to be approved and sent back to you. But of course, there are delays, there are hiccups. So we want to make sure that everyone has their visa in hand well before they need to fly over to Vietnam. So again, if you've not already applied for your visa, please do so immediately. Now, those of you who are from the UK, you actually don't have to apply for a visa before you come over. You can apply for the 90-day tourist visa if you'd like. Otherwise, you also can just simply fly on over and receive a free visa on arrival for 45 days. But again, only if you're from the UK that applies to. If you're another nationality, this does not apply. You have to apply for a tourist visa before you come over. But those of you who are applying for tourist visas and receive your visa paperwork, please do remember to print that off and bring it with you on your flights over to Vietnam. You will present it to your airline when you check in. They'll probably ask to see a copy of your visa to make sure that you can board okay, and then you'll fly over to Vietnam. And when you arrive at the Vietnam airport, you just have to get in line for immigration. And when you speak to the officer, you'll hand them your paperwork. They'll stamp your passport with the visa, and then you're good to go. Now, please note, Vietnamese immigration does not require proof of exit from Vietnam. However, sometimes airlines want to cover themselves a little bit, and so they may ask to see proof of exit from Vietnam within your 90 days or 45 days if you're from the UK, 90 days for your tourist visa. This, more often than not, happens with South African people as they fly from South Africa. It does seem that airlines in South Africa just tend to be a little bit more strict with this sort of stuff. So do make sure we really recommend to make sure with your particular airline that you've booked with, maybe call ahead or talk to their hotline and ask them if they're going to need to see proof of exit from Vietnam at all to board your flight. Again, Vietnamese immigration doesn't need proof of exit to enter Vietnam, so they generally won't ask for that. But we sometimes see that airlines, just to cover themselves a little bit more, may ask for that. They also may not. So just be aware of that. Again, this more often than not happens with South African passport holders, unfortunately. So our recommendation is to call ahead and ask the airline if that's something that they need to see. Another thing that sometimes happens is you can argue with the airline and say, no, I don't need this for immigration, but they will insist on you having an exit ticket from Vietnam within your certain number of days for your visa. So you may need to purchase a very quick, cheap one-way ticket out of Vietnam to another neighboring country like Cambodia or Thailand or somewhere like that. You probably won't end up using this ticket, of course. So if you can, the cheaper of a ticket you can find, the better in this case. Hopefully this won't happen to anyone, but sometimes we do see that airlines really insist on that. So if it's the difference of not boarding your flight or boarding your flight, you might need to consider booking a cheap one-way ticket. The other potential option is you could use a website called Best Onward Ticket, which costs $16 to reserve a flight for 48 hours. This sometimes works, this sometimes doesn't. This website will issue you a reservation. So sometimes airlines will accept that, sometimes they won't. So up to you, whatever you'd prefer to do. You could try that because it's much cheaper often than booking a one-way, even though one-way tickets still are very inexpensive. But Best Onward Ticket is only about $16. So it's another option potentially that you could look at. So again, for the TESOL guys, tourist visas, you're eventually, after the TESOL course, going to need to complete a visa trip at some point. Some schools will ask you to do it almost immediately after doing your TESOL course. Some are okay with you kind of running out the tourist visa and then doing your visa trip to switch to a business visa at a later date. So as you guys are going through the placement process during your TESOL course in Vietnam, we'll talk to you about that, and we'll check in with schools and see what their process that they want to do once you've accepted a school placement with them, and we can go over all those details with you once you're in Vietnam. Budgeting. Okay, so we've sent you budget guides in the past. It's in our final briefing documents, all that sort of stuff. But the really important thing to remember about coming over is that most of you won't receive your first paycheck for at least a month, if not longer. Those of you who are doing your doing the placement program, generally around a month after you arrive in Vietnam, you'll receive your first paycheck, maybe about 5 or 6 weeks. But those of you who are doing the TESOL course, you're coming for a month, and then you have to teach for a month before you receive your first paycheck generally. So you need to sustain yourselves for at least 2 months before you receive your first paycheck. So do make sure that you are paying very close attention to the budget guide that we've sent. This is simply a guide. Obviously, everybody has their own spending habits and their own lifestyle choices and that sort of stuff. So the guide that we've sent you is simply a guide. And the amounts that we've suggested people have access to or bring over is the absolute minimum amount that we could expect someone to need to get through to that first paycheck. So for placement program, those of you who are coming and just doing the orientation week with us before starting at school, we have advised to budget at least $1,500. And those of you who are doing the TESOL program, at least $2,000. Again, and I cannot stress this enough, this is an absolute minimum that you have to have access to get through until your first paycheck. If you have access to more funds than that, we highly recommend having access and bringing those kinds of funds with you to ensure that you are looking after yourself, you have enough money for your rent, you know, for extra things that you want to do, travel around, go out with some friends, et cetera, et cetera. Again, that $1,500, that $2,000 budget that we recommended is the absolute minimum. That's for someone who's not going out, who's not doing extra excursions, who lives in a really inexpensive area, finds an inexpensive accommodation, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, eats local food instead of Western food a lot, that sort of stuff. So do bear that in mind as you're considering your funds, your finances, and the budget. As a rule of thumb, just as a reminder, when you are looking at accommodation, generally you're asked to pay your first month's rent as well as a deposit that equals 1 month's rent. So technically you generally need 2 months of rent up front when you move into an accommodation. Sometimes accommodations will ask you for 2 months of rent as a deposit plus your first month's rent. So you might need 3 months rent up front when you move in. So do be aware of that. Make sure you're budgeting for that. Of course, the accommodation amount can range significantly depending on where you're placed, what kind of accommodation you've got, et cetera, et cetera. So we estimate that budget can be anywhere between 150 to 350 on average, but of course it can go up much higher than that if you would like a higher level accommodation, of course. And those of you who are on the TESOL, of course, in our budget guide, it does ask you to remember to budget for the visa trip that you'll eventually have to do. So do make sure that you are reviewing that information as well. Okay, banking. First, make sure before you leave that you let your bank know that you're going to Vietnam, because sometimes when you use your card abroad for the first time and you haven't already let your bank know, they will flag it as fraud, thinking someone's got a hold of your card. So do make sure that you're alerting your bank to your travels. Now, when you bring money over, if you're planning on bringing money over to Vietnam to exchange, so in Vietnam we use Vietnamese dong, so any sort of other currency, it might be accepted in airports and things like that, but they definitely, dollars, euros, pounds, rand, etc., that will not be accepted in Vietnam. You have to use Vietnamese dong. So if you're bringing money over to exchange in Vietnam, make sure that whatever currency you're bringing over with you, the currency is new, there's no rips, no tears, nothing like that. Because if there are marks or rips or tears, often exchange places will not exchange those bills. For whatever reason, they might think it's fraud or they're fake or something like that. So do make sure any bills you bring over with the idea you want to exchange that, make sure that they are in perfect condition, essentially. Now, of course, if you have a card, you can use that card while abroad. You go to an ATM, it'll just spit out Vietnamese dong automatically. You don't have a choice in that. Now, if you're from South Africa, please do not bring South African rand to Vietnam. It's incredibly difficult to exchange South African rand outside of South Africa. So do make sure that you are exchanging your South African rand while you're still home. If you can exchange it directly to Vietnamese dong, fabulous, no problem. Otherwise, I would recommend exchanging to US dollars because you'll get a decent rate for that then to be exchanged in Vietnam after you arrive. You can exchange it in Ho Chi Minh. There are so many different places you can exchange at. We can send you some locations of exchange places after you arrive in Vietnam. But do remember, if you're coming from South Africa, exchange your rand into Vietnamese dong or US dollars before you leave South Africa. Okay, some what to pack stuff. Remember that schools in Vietnam generally aim for business casual kind of dress code. So for women, skirts, dresses, trousers are all fine. Skirts and dresses, they have to be at least knee length, if not longer than that. Blouses, collared shirts, totally fine to wear as well, as long as it covers your shoulders, generally to t-shirt length, covers cleavage, covers your belly, etc. Closed-toed shoes as well for women, like flats or slip-on sandals or something like that. For men, you want to aim for trousers or long pants, no jeans or tracksuit bottoms or anything like that, but nice kind of trousers or khakis of some sort. A collared shirt is always good. A tie is optional, but it is really nice. Schools do appreciate that, especially when you first get into your school and you're training and you're getting to know them. It's nice to kind of put that best foot forward sort of thing. For shoes, closed-toed shoes, like nice dress shoes are always good. Try not to wear sneakers. That's really not the kind of vibe the schools are going for. Schools also sometimes do have a particular polo that they use for their uniform. So they'll give you polo shirts if needed and let you know when, if you need to wear them, when you might need to wear them. Tattoos must be covered at all times when at school. And facial piercings besides earrings must be removed, of course. Now, more and more these days, I will say schools are becoming more lenient on this sort of stuff. So if you do have tattoos, if you do have facial piercings, we always recommend starting with those things covered up or removed. But as you get to know your school, you can ask, is it okay if I, roll my sleeves up and show my tattoos or have a nose ring in or something like that? More often than not, schools are fine with that, but it's good to start off without those things showing or without those things in, and then get to know them and then ask about that. Okay, some details about arrival to Vietnam. You'll arrive to the Ho Chi Minh City Airport and you'll proceed through immigration unless you are traveling through Vietnam prior to coming to Vietnam, or excuse me, you're traveling through Vietnam prior to coming on our program. Some of you may be, arriving to Vietnam a couple of days early and going to Hanoi or somewhere else. Then you would do this kind of arrival procedure before that. So you'll arrive to Ho Chi Minh City, you'll proceed through immigration. For those who need to get your visa on arrival, you'll do that. For those of you with a tourist visa already in hand, you'll just go through immigration. It's very, very well labeled to go where you need to go. So just have a look at the signs as you walk through the airport when you arrive. Then we will arrange to collect all of you from the Ho Chi Minh City Airport when you arrive. So you continue to send your flight details in if you've not already done so. Most of you have. So if you haven't yet submitted your flights, do submit those as soon as possible so that we can arrange that for you. So once you've done your immigration sort of stuff, you've collected your bags, then your airport pickup will meet you at the Ho Chi Minh City Airport at Pillar 3. It's very close. There's a Popeyes restaurant right around there, so you can kind of aim towards that Popeyes restaurant, and Pillar 3 you'll see there. And they'll be standing with your name on a sign very similar to this. And all you have to do is approach them and let them know that you're you, and they'll pick you up from the airport and bring you to the accommodation that we have arranged for everybody. So what we'd also like you to do, and on the next slide, I'll have this information up. Do download an app called Zalo, and that's the WhatsApp of Vietnam. So everybody pretty much uses Zalo to communicate while in Vietnam. So we'll have you download Zalo over the next couple of weeks before you fly over, and that way, if for some reason you can't find your pickup driver, you can contact me or Lan On, who's our on-the-ground coordinator in Vietnam, and we can call the driver and see where they are. Sometimes they are stuck in traffic and you just have to wait a little extra, that sort of thing. Or again, if like your flights are delayed or canceled for some reason, your flights change, then you can update us and we can update the driver then for your pickup. The airport does have free Wi-Fi, so you should be easily able to connect to Zalo or WhatsApp if you cannot add us on Zalo for some reason. That way we can all be connected once people are arriving in Vietnam. Okay, so Zalo, here's a symbol for Zalo. Do download this and start adding me and Lon to Zalo. Our numbers are here listed on this slide, so you can pause this and download Zalo and add us. We will start to create a group chat over the next couple of weeks for everybody on the program, and we'll add everybody in there as we start to get people's contact information. So send us a message on Zalo and we can start doing that. Now, sometimes people have trouble with Zalo, especially if you're from South Africa. For some reason, Zalo doesn't seem to like South African phone numbers. So try and download Zalo first. If you can't, for some reason, if it's not working or whatever the issue might be, then let me know, send me an email, and I'll send you my WhatsApp information, and I can add you there, and I can add Lon, and we can create a little group chat on WhatsApp until you arrive in Vietnam, at which point then you'll get a Vietnamese phone number and you'll be able to download Zalo just fine there. So we'll work it out. Try Zalo first. If that doesn't work, we'll do WhatsApp. Right, and then the Sunday before your program begins, we like to have like a little welcome meeting for everybody. So Lon On, who's our program coordinator on the ground in Vietnam, will meet you at your hotel and bring you to like a little cafe, local cafe, to do our welcome meeting with everybody, where we'll, you know, get to know you guys, you'll get to know us, and she'll talk you through more about what's to come during that orientation week and beyond. So these are the staff that you may be working with already or you'll come into contact with at some point, hopefully. So Mike Volpe is our managing director. He's the co-owner of Explorasia. Then we have Gary, who is our TESOL instructor for your particular group. So you'll see him for those of you who are doing the TESOL course, you'll meet him and get to know him really well, as he'll be your instructor. Lon On, of course, is our program coordinator based on the ground in Vietnam. She is originally from Hanoi. She has been with us since the inception of our Vietnamese program, so 7 or 8 years now. And of course, I'm Cassidy, the program manager. So I won't be in Vietnam when you guys are there, unfortunately. I'll be helping out with other programs in Southeast Asia, but I will always still be available. I'll have you on Zalo or WhatsApp, by email, etc. And I'll continue to check in over the course of your course to see how you are, see if you have any questions, and offer extra support. All right, one last final thing. We do have a connection program that we like to offer. So during your orientation week, we'll go over more about our alumni teachers and how to connect with them. But it's a nice thing to do if anyone is interested. This will all happen once you're in Vietnam. We will send around a sign-up sheet for those who are wanting to connect with other people in Vietnam, and then we'll pair you up with some alumni teachers as needed. So that will all be done in Vietnam, but it's a nice kind of thing to do, something to look forward to for when you come over. Right, and just as some final points, we're all very much looking forward to having you over in Vietnam in just a couple of weeks. There are some amazing things about teaching in Vietnam, including all this sort of stuff. There will be some hard days, of course, as we all have, teaching and living abroad in a different country. But we're here to support. We're here to help answer questions. I'm here to help guide you through your next steps and your first steps of teaching in Vietnam, that sort of thing. So we're all really looking forward to welcoming you very soon, getting to know you, and helping you start your journey teaching abroad. And that's the end of my presentation. So if anybody has any questions, anything you'd like to touch base on, please send me an email. As always, I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Feel free to also schedule a call with me if you'd like. You can use my Calendly link that I've sent to people in the past. Feel free to just schedule a call if that makes it easier for you. Whatever you'd like to do, let me know. But again, any questions, concerns, anything you'd need answered or support on, please reach out as soon as you can. And yeah, we look very much forward to having you in Vietnam soon. So thanks very much for watching this, and we'll see you soon.